Hi Ben, Akin, and Brian. I'm sending this video to you rather than writing. I think it'll come across a lot clearer, as I have quite a few things just to clarify. Ask for clarification is more like it, and just ask for any feedback I can get, any pointers. What I'm questioning throughout this is just, it's not that I have a issue or a problem with anything. I'm just trying to get more information because it's a lot to comprehend, and it is my first time getting into this stuff. So I got a messenger from Ben just a little while ago, Ben, and you mentioned a bunch of things to me, and I'm just going to go over some of them and then just ask questions just to make sure I got things correct. And I really encourage Akin and Brian to throw in things for themselves that can clarify further as well, just so it's not just coming through Ben about what Akin or Brian has said, just so I can get a bit of a bigger picture before I make my choices and move further ahead in what I'm doing. I mentioned to Ben earlier on last year that I'm interested in being part of the Boz breeding program, although I don't fully know what that entails. I only know a little bit, so that is also part of the questions that I'm asking, is to get a clearer sense of what am I becoming involved with, and how do I play a part in this bigger program. So excuse me if I look down and read stuff. I've just written down my pointers and things and certain questions to make sure I cover them all. Ben, you mentioned at the beginning of your message that you said us at Boz Canada, and I just want to clarify. I'm assuming, well, I shouldn't assume anything. Boz, when you say us at Boz Canada, that makes me think that Boz Canada is kind of the umbrella term of all breeders, however many there are in Canada, working together kind of on equal level input, investment in this bigger program, so that Boz Canada is kind of the umbrella term for, or the I just know that I remember when we were first looking into Boz years ago, I was speaking to Tarek, and I remember he was Boz, or he represented or called himself Boz USA. So these are just little bits of information that I have that don't quite line up, so these are the reasons why I'm asking these questions. So also, Ben, you said that you and Akin have a few plans to fix the straight stifles that Khaleesi has, and some of her sisters, and because of the straight stifles, my observations, and I've sent you guys videos, what I found is it's not just that or the byproduct of having these straight legs, and it's not just straight legs, but it's kind of like she has a bit of kind of a turning inwards of her feet or ankles, I guess as a result of the straight stifles. And also when she walks, not like Tor, when he walks, he just has a smooth motion and his hips stay relatively straight, so there's not a lot of wear and tear on the hips. Whereas Khaleesi, it sways her hips, I guess, as a compensation for the straight legs, and then this kind of a curving inwards thing. And I believe that is why she injured her patella when it popped out, I don't know, about 6 months ago, is because of this overcompensation, which I didn't notice at the time. Just for your information, as you could imagine, this issue with her patella coming out cost us quite a bit in veterinary bills, and still, on occasion, there's a lot of time that goes into it, and there was a lot of stress too, because I was trying to figure out what was going on, why things were happening. You know, I was hearing things on the Boz group about different issues that sometimes happen with the Boz, and I had the vet check things out, and she said with the x-ray, she said her hips were perfect. So as far as for breeding, her hips are excellent. It's just this patella thing, and then but I wasn't sure where this came from and where it was going. So now I get a better sense of the context and where it came from. Anything that you guys can all contribute or to explain and expand upon this whole thing, how it came about. Ben mentioned something about Guzel and Kral, each, like the parents of Khaleesi and Tor, had straight stifles, and the question that comes to my mind, if I understood it correctly, is Ben, if you guys knew that the two parents had straight stifles, would that not have meant that there was an increased chance of the puppies having this issue or worse, which is kind of what happened? So this is me just asking. It's not an accusation. I'm just asking for clarification because I haven't bred dogs before. You guys have, especially Brian and Occam, which one of the reasons why I'm including you in on this video, but also because you're part of this bigger breeding program that I might be taking part in, and I'm interested in taking part in, and so I want to get feedback from everyone on this so I get a bigger sense of clarity. Okay, so I understand, if I'm correct, that Ben, or that you guys are offering me, through Ben, telling me that that you're offering me a female puppy from a carefully chosen breeding, and that the carefully chosen breeding is what I'm interested in getting more clarity about. Ben had mentioned that a bunch of things that would be kind of covered in that breeding, as far as temperament and guarding ability, hips, and everything else, which are just basically all the things that I would hope would be of careful concern in a breeding across the board. So I must be leaving something out in my understanding, or it's been left out, in the sense that what makes this breeding so special. Ben mentions that it's a special breeding, and I know that there's something to it. Now, my questions to you, Occam, are you mentioned last year about working on some careful breedings for Brian and Benjamin, and that the puppies that you were showing were not for sale, that they were in turn for you to select from for other breedings, and those being chosen and sent to Ben and Brian, and that for Ben you had this special selection that you were working on for Canadian Winters that had almond eyes, longer coat, and certain protection like hair in between the toes and other details. So what I'm wondering, because Ben, you mentioned that this was a careful selected breeding, I'm curious, is this part of, is this what Occam you mentioned about for Canadian Winters, is that part of what's being planned that Ben's mentioning here, in a selection of a male and a female to breed, and that I would get a puppy from? Because that is of interest to me, if it is. Now, okay, so on to the next question. And that question is, when would these puppies roughly be planned to be available? Because my concerns about getting a puppy, because I basically have my two dogs, and the cost of, just general cost of having dogs, and especially the feeding, I can only imagine that I could ever possibly afford any more than, I couldn't afford more than 3 dogs. So 3 is my limit. So I've got 1 dog to be very careful about how I choose it and what I choose. So my concerns with the puppy are, and I hope that I can get some clarity on this, because maybe that is the best option, but I'll just give you my concerns. A puppy will not be ready to breed at the soonest I could get it, that I can imagine. I could only breed it as soon as like 3 years from now. If it takes a while before the breeding, and then before I get the puppy, and then the puppy's got to be at least, I think, 2 years old, if not a bit older. So that leaves me to 2020 before I could breed. And my next concern is that I have no guarantee that the puppy is going to be of a certain quality, so I take on that risk. I did that with my 2 pups here, and I took that, and all breeders take those chances. I mean, it's not a new thing. But now that I only have one more choice left to me, I've got to really, really watch what I choose and choose carefully. So these are questions that I have, or concerns that I have, is, and I hope you guys can answer them, is, you know, what is, from a breeder's perspective, what is my best choice for that 3rd dog? I had mentioned to Aachen, I mentioned to you once or twice just by messenger that I would be interested in the possibility of me getting an adult mate female dog for Tor to increase my chances of a really good breeding by not having to wait the time for a puppy to grow up, but also not having to wait to find out what that puppy turns out like. If I was a breeder who could keep on taking on dogs, however that's done, then I could take those chances of puppies, you know, and select from them. And I guess part of that would be to give up certain dogs if they weren't good for breeding to someone who wants just a pet or just one for a guardian. But with me, whatever dogs I choose, and my maximum being 3, like Khaleesi as an example, I've already fallen in love with Khaleesi, so regardless of a hip issue, or in her case, straight stifles and her patella, I can't give her up or anything. So she is with me forever, you know, until she ages and leaves. So I've got that one last shot with another dog. So that's what my interest was in having an adult female, and I was thinking of a female that, as we were mentioning earlier about dogs more suited to Canadian winters, and then Tor just happened to turn out to be in line with the description of what you were working on, Aachen, and clearly he definitely does have more resilience in the cold weather with the way his coat is, and just his heavier bone. He's just a better suited dog for the cold. I have to bring Khaleesi in way before I have to bring Tor in. Also, just to mention, the amount of people that I have had contact me interested in when are we going to have puppies available, with Tor being the father. It's crazy, the amount of people, and I keep just putting them off and saying, well, we're nowhere near ready yet, Tor's not old enough, and we haven't got a mate for him. So that's also an aspect of my excitement about getting the right dog. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the only way that I can be more sure is to get an adult female rather than a puppy to wait to find out, like with Khaleesi, always with that risk that I may not get the ideal dog, or even in the least the ideal suited dog. It could be a dog that is good in health and conformation and temperament, but isn't as suited to Tor. And the thing is, that's my chances gone. It's like I played my cards, I can't play anymore. So if I get a puppy and the puppy doesn't turn out good for breeding, I'm basically not a breeder. You know, that's part of my concerns. Now, just to go on here, I should just mention, I've invested a lot of money in setting up my place and my environment for breeding the dogs, for selling them, for raising the puppies. I feel like I've created an excellent environment for dogs to grow up, to be trained, and for prospective buyers to come and see, or at least see on my website, about buying puppies. So I think that the environment that I have will also sell the puppies really well. And the environment that I've set up, and still setting up, is about a 5-acre perimeter fenced in, no climb fencing. I've got, as you've probably seen on my postings, a really nice barn being built. I've got alpacas coming. I have 14 alpacas. I've got my 2 Icelandic sheep. I'm getting Muscovy ducks and some Icelandic chickens as well, and at some point some pigs. So I'll have a nice variety of animals, a really nice little barnyard, very beautiful look, a nice spread of the way the land lays, and then forest all around. So an excellent environment for both dogs to grow up, puppies to be born and raised, and for people who want to buy pups to see them in that environment, which is the perfect environment for, one of the perfect environments for these dogs to grow up in. So I put a lot of time and money into that, so you guys know I'm serious. It's not like I'm just someone in, you know, a corner of a house wanting to do a little backyard breeding or anything. So, but at the same time, spending all this money, I have to be very careful with this last choice. And I keep repeating this, but I'm just stressing how important it is to me that I make the best choice that I can. Now, just to move on to my next. Okay. One thing I wanted to mention with the possibility that Benjamin, you mentioned with also the option of what the male and female that are being brought over that would be bred for the puppies that I would get one of, that also that male could be bred with Khaleesi to breed up and in hope to correct the issue that she has with her leg as far as the puppies go. Now, my concern with doing a breeding with Khaleesi like that are the risks of, well, number one, before even mentioning risks, is someone inquiring about puppies that I get from Khaleesi. I would not be able to, in good conscience, tell them about the puppies without saying that Khaleesi does have an issue with her stifles, and of course that we have bred accordingly and so on, but I would have to mention that in good conscience. And I know myself, if I was that person, I probably wouldn't want to take that risk, because I could always find someone that's doing a different breeding, or I might be more interested if the price was lower. So the way I look at it is I'd have to tell them, I would want to tell them about her issue, but I would have to, the first breeding, the first set of puppies, I'd have to sell them for less money. And then if those puppies all turned out great and there's no issues with them, then I could use that as a kind of a proving that her next litter would be fine, and then I could bring the price back up to normal. I would really welcome some input and advice on that. Maybe there's something that I'm not correct about, but that's how I would see things. Okay, so I've covered the female that I wanted. Benjamin mentioned that you probably would not be interested in sending me an adult female, and I just wanted to know why, if that is correct, and if I'm interpreting this correct as well, why you wouldn't want to be sending me an adult female, or finding me an adult female that would suit Tor for breeding. These are all just questions because I'm new to this and I don't quite understand all the details. And I already mentioned about all my reasons for wanting an adult female rather than a puppy. And I think I pretty well covered all of my concerns, and the rest is just, you know, anything you guys can fill me in on, let me know about, because I feel like I'm only getting kind of half of the picture, and if I can just get that fuller picture of understanding, I can know to what degree I can be a part of this program with the limitations of my finances. And just last but not least, I just want to thank Aachen, you, Brian, and Ben for all the work that you're doing, and Aachen especially everything you've been doing in Turkey to get the Boz over here to Canada and the US in all of the details and the just everything you've been working on in Turkey. I can't even imagine how much work you've been doing, running all over the place and doing all these, setting up these associations and memberships and promoting the Boz everywhere. So all you guys are working really hard, and I just want you to know that I really appreciate that and your generosity in offering me a pup. So I don't in any way want you to think that I'm questioning the generosity of the offer in any way. I am completely in appreciation for that offer and the offer of the male as well in mating with Khaleesi, and that all these questions are just questions to get clarity, and that not as a complaint. And that. Thank you very much.